Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée mondiale de la santé, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des Nations unies, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Monsieur le Directeur général de l'OMS, je veux vous remercier de m'avoir invité à ouvrir avec vous cette 73e Assemblée mondiale de la santé. Cette session est sans nul doute l'une des plus importantes de l'histoire de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé. Elle doit être un moment d'unité, de solidarité, mais aussi de lucidité et d'action face à la crise mondiale inédite que nous traversons tous. Souvenons-nous de ce qui a présidé à la fondation de l'OMS en 1948, bâtir un monde nouveau où chacun pourrait jouir d'une meilleure santé, parce que c'est le droit fondamental de tout être humain. Souvenons-nous des progrès aussi accomplis depuis, de tout ce que nous avons su faire ensemble avec l'OMS, avec tous les acteurs de la santé mondiale, au service de cet objectif. L'augmentation de l'espérance de vie, le recul de la mortalité infantile, l'éradication de maladies meurtrières comme la variole, le combat qui reste entier quant à lui contre la tuberculose, le paludisme ou le VIH, pour l'élargissement de l'accès aux médicaments, à la vaccination, pour le renforcement des systèmes de santé. La pandémie de Covid-19 a bouleversé nos vies, nos sociétés, a mis nos économies à l'arrêt, a aussi révélé nos vulnérabilités à tous. Elle nous a rappelé aussi, s'il le fallait, toute la valeur de la santé humaine et de ceux qui en prennent soin. Je tiens, en cette année consacrée par l'OMS aux sages-femmes et aux infirmiers, à saluer tous ceux qui, chaque jour, sont sur le terrain pour prendre soin des autres, parfois au péril de leur vie, comme l'épouvantable attaque contre une maternité en Afghanistan l'a encore montré tragiquement il y a quelques jours. Alors, au moment où les soignants se battent contre la pandémie, au moment où les populations de tous nos pays font face avec courage, nous n'avons pas le droit de nous diviser. Nous n'avons pas le droit de nous dérober. Nous avons collectivement un devoir d'efficacité. La priorité absolue, la seule qui vaille, c'est de venir à bout de cette pandémie. Chacun de nous porte en lui une partie de la solution. États, organisations internationales, fonds spécialisés, organisations de la société civile, industrie pharmaceutique, banques de développement, citoyens. Ce n'est qu'en unissant nos forces que nous viendrons à bout de cette pandémie. Nous avons besoin de l'OMS pour son rôle irremplaçable de coordination, pour son expertise scientifique, sa connaissance du terrain. Nous avons besoin d'une OMS forte face au Covid-19. Et l'OMS, c'est nous, ce sont ses États membres. Il dépend donc de nous de lui permettre de jouer tout son rôle dans la réponse internationale aux pandémies. C'est la raison pour laquelle la France a décidé il y a quelques jours de renforcer substantiellement le soutien financier apporté à notre organisation. C'est la raison pour laquelle, aux côtés de l'OMS, avec nos partenaires européens, avec l'ensemble des acteurs de la santé mondiale, nous avons lancé l'initiative ACT-A pour soutenir massivement la recherche, accélérer le développement et permettre un accès universel aux moyens de lutte contre la pandémie. Parce que oui, un vaccin, s'il est découvert face au Covid-19, sera un bien public mondial auquel chacun devra pouvoir avoir accès. C'est une question d'efficacité. Tant que la maladie sera la réalité de quelques-uns, elle sera une menace pour tous. C'est une question de principe. La santé humaine ne se discute pas, ne se réserve pas, ne se monnaie pas. L'Europe s'engage pleinement dans la construction de la réponse internationale à la pandémie. Le 4 mai dernier, la conférence de financement organisée par la Commission européenne a permis de mobiliser 7,5 milliards d'euros au service des objectifs d'ACT-A. Avec ses partenaires internationaux, l'Europe porte dans cette session une réponse solide pour renforcer l'application du règlement sanitaire international, améliorer les systèmes d'alerte et de réaction aux urgences, renforcer la recherche, mieux comprendre en toute transparence et avec un esprit de coopération la crise à laquelle nous sommes confrontés et en tirer tous les enseignements et donc mieux y répondre. Nous devons regarder en face, avec lucidité, avec exigence, ce qui a fonctionné et ce qui n'a pas fonctionné dans la gestion internationale de la crise. Nous avons l'occasion d'apporter une réponse unie à la pandémie, sans complaisance, sans accusation non fondée. Unie, exigeante, lucide, c'est notre responsabilité. J'appelle l'ensemble des membres de cette Assemblée à la responsabilité et à l'action. Au nom de ce qui a présidé à la fondation de notre organisation et au nom d'un droit fondamental de l'humanité, l'espérance.
The coronavirus outbreak has been declared a pandemic. Here's the WHO earlier.
We're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic. This is the first pandemic caused by a coronavirus. And we have never before seen a pandemic that can be controlled at the same time.
Well, you'll see coverage of this announcement on the BBC News website. In our coverage, we describe a pandemic as meaning a disease that's spreading in multiple countries around the world at the same time. But the question here is, what does this change in categorisation actually mean? Well, here's the BBC's Philippa Roxby.
The WHO says this will not change anything that they're saying. It will change very little that countries are actually doing, because they've already been having very close relationships with many of these countries over weeks and weeks now and telling them what to do. So this is really, it's not surprising that this word is now being used mainly in a figurative way. It won't change very much on the ground.
Now, this graphic from Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Research Centre shows the spread of the disease across the world. The bigger the red circle, the bigger the outbreak. We know there are now more than 120,000 cases globally in 118 countries, and more than 4,300 people have died. And one consequence of this pandemic is pressure on healthcare systems, for example, in Iran and Italy.
This is really putting Italy's healthcare system, which is one of the best, most well-developed in Europe, it's putting it under a great deal of strain. We've seen footage from some hospitals where intensive care units have been set up in hospital corridors, and there are fears that if this virus spreads significantly to the south, where the healthcare is not as well developed, that could have a very serious effect.
The coronavirus is rapidly claiming lives across the country, and not just the elderly, young medics in their 20s. With thousands of confirmed cases, the hospitals can't cope, nor can the staff. This is one of several makeshift hospitals that are being set up in the city of Qom, the epicenter of the outbreak.
And of course, in Iran and Italy, as the number of cases rise, so does the pressure on healthcare, and that's a concern that's widely shared. Here's Angela Merkel speaking today.
When the virus is out there, the population has no immunity and no therapy exists. Then 60 to 70% of the population will be infected, as long as this situation continues to exist.
Well, 60 to 70% of the German population is around 50 million people, and if that were to happen, even if only a small proportion of those people needed hospital care, that would still swamp the German health system. And earlier this week, Mrs. Merkel outlined the best way to avoid that kind of scenario.
Ist das wirksamste Mittel gegen das Virus der Faktor Zeit.
In a situation like this, the most effective means against the virus is to gain time, to reduce the pressure on doctors and hospitals. If a lot of people were to become ill within a very short space of time, the most effective tool against the virus is to slow it down and to stretch out its development.
And this idea is often called flattening the curve. This is what it looks like in a graphic form. This is from the New York Times, adapted from a report from the Centre for Disease Control. The red area here is what would happen with the surge of infections if you have no proper measures in place. And you can see it goes across this dotted line, which signifies healthcare capacity. It's way above healthcare capacity. If a country, though, concedes early on there are going to be large numbers of cases and focuses on slowing the spread, the outbreak takes longer to play out. But you never reach that point where a healthcare system can't cope. Here's one senior US official.
And there are a number of things that one can do in order to blunt it. If you look at the curves of outbreaks, they go big peaks and they come down. What we need to do is flatten that down. That would have less people infected. That would ultimately have less deaths. You do that by trying to interfere with the natural flow of the outbreak.
Well, the man who popularised this graph is a population and health analyst called Drew Harris. He was initially using this to teach his classes, but it's since gone viral after it was linked to this particular virus. And as Drew points out in this tweet, you've got to bear in mind that what his graph represents is the difference between finding an intensive care unit bed and a ventilator or being treated in the parking lot tent. And I spoke to Drew earlier from Philadelphia on what governments can do to flatten the curve.
Well, they certainly can begin to isolate and treat the sick, to quarantine the people who they've contacted, close the schools to prevent the spread of disease through the children, and encourage social distancing, keeping people apart both in time and place. And that means maybe folks stagger work hours so they don't go to work at the same time, or you make sure that when people are in the same place that they're not as close to each other. And of course, we need to protect ourselves individually by making sure we wash our hands and using hand sanitizers.
But there's evidently some discussion about when best to bring those measures in. The UK, for example, is acknowledging they may come, but they're not coming yet.
Yes, the challenge in starting too soon is that people become complacent. They say, well, what's the point? There's no disease spreading. But if you wait too late until the diarrhea is taking hold, then you are dealing with a situation like they have in Italy. So that timing is going to be absolutely critical. And generally, the experts are going to tell you is when cases start to show up spreading within the community from person to person. The challenge we have with this particular virus is it seems that people are contagious even before they show symptoms. So they don't know that they're at risk for spreading the disease until maybe they have spread it to other people.
Isn't there a third scenario we could add to your graph, which is where governments do take the relevant measures, but still the number of cases take healthcare systems beyond their capacity?
Well, it's all about flattening the curve. Maybe we don't do it as completely as necessary, but anything we can do to lower that peak and prevent everyone from getting sick at that same moment in time, instead spread them out so they get sick later, is going to be an improvement and hopefully reserve some of that capacity for the people who really need it.
And one final question, is there a choice between trying to contain this virus and trying to flatten the curve? Can those two things actually be working against each other?
I think at this point, containment is not going to happen. This disease is going to spread. Every expert will tell you that a pandemic of this type is going to eventually move itself into every community in the world. The question is whether we have vaccines at that point to help prevent the further spread of it, and whether we are protecting the most vulnerable people in this particular situation, the elderly and the folks with immunocompromised systems, and making sure that they don't catch the disease because they're the ones who are most likely to die.